we marching into World War III? Are we seeing another color revolution go down? Are we creating a new Ukraine in the country of Georgia? Here with us now is Alex Rubinstein. He is the co-founder of the Investigative Journalism Project, Active Measures, that he is put together with Kit Klarenberg, I believe. Kit Klarenberg is with Alex on this. Alex, welcome to the show.
Yeah, that's right. We've been around for just about a month now, and I think we're doing some hard hitting reporting.
That is really cool. Yeah, we've had Kit on the show several times. He's great. You're great. What are you guys mainly covering?
Well, I think this stuff that our followers have come to expect from the two of us, definitely things dealing with American soft power, use of the CIA, MI6, uh, the rooted off versions of it, like the National Endowment for Democracy and what they're up to, the United States Agency for International Development, basically all of the tricks of the of U.S. foreign policy.
Yeah. Oh, well, there's definitely a lot of tricks there. As we're going to talk about. So Georgia, not the state, the country that is bordering Russia. So we're hearing two stories right now. The first story is that the people of Georgia don't want to have any Russian influence. There's a law that was recently that is up for debate. It's been passed. I'm not sure if it's been vetoed, and you'll explain to us kind of the status of that law, but that the Georgian people are outraged. They want democracy. This is what we're hearing from, especially the Western leaders, right? They want to be free like Ukraine. They don't want to be influenced by Russia. They want to be a free people. Then on the flip side, we're hearing that this is potentially another color revolution, very similar to what we saw in Ukraine in 2014. That there is some influence going on here, and that Georgia might be next up to bat to be destroyed the same way that Ukraine is being destroyed right now. So kind of walk us through. So those are the two stories. Walk us through first the protests and the law that they're protesting over.
Sure. So the law is a foreign agents style law, or basically what it does is it forces NGOs, non-governmental organizations in the country to, if they receive more than 20% of their funding from foreign sources, to disclose that. So, it's really not an unreasonable piece of legislation. And I would add that the European Union has a directive that it is currently considering, which would, do much the same. The U.S., of course, has the Foreign Agents Registration Act, which is only enforced on Russian media, though it should theoretically be used against all, foreign funded
Right.
entities, NGOs, or media. So this is a big problem because the United States has basically said that the United States and many European powers have said that if this law goes into law, that will prevent Georgia from joining the European Union. And I would add that joining the European Union for whatever reason is a popular idea in Georgia. They are right on Russia's border. They're next to Azerbaijan and the sea. So and there is a history of a war between Georgia and Russia.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing to keep in mind here is that these NGOs, as we see, all over the globe, whether it's like Venezuela or Nicaragua or, any country, Iran, any country that's, targeted for regime change, at the forefront of those movements, social movements, are organizations which are funded by the National Endowment for Democracy,
Mm-hmm.
which is a CIA cutout. It is said by its founder to do the job that the CIA did covertly 25 years ago, overtly. Another co-founder said that, it would be a shame for democratic groups around the world to be seen as subsidized by the CIA. That's why the endowment was created. So it is very much an instrument of American foreign policy, which has historically funded violent revolutionary groups across the globe. Georgia, in particular, has an incredibly bloated NGO sphere. So there's actually one NGO for every 150 Georgian citizens.
Wow.
90% of the funding for these organizations comes from across Georgia's borders. So it's not Georgians that are funding these organizations. It's the EU, it's the United States. this is the problem because this is a transparency law at heart.
Mhm.
And they don't, Western powers do not want what they're doing to be transparent. They want to do this as secretly as possible because of the shady things that they're up to. Now,
Right.
if you don't mind, I'll just give one example: is the Shame movement. It's a Georgian NGO, which is funded by the National Endowment for Democracy. The NED has given $10 million over the past 4 years to NGOs in Georgia, and the Shame movement is the group that's leading this protest. If you go to, I went, for an investigation I did, I went to their resource page on their website, and the entirety of it was training activists about how to deal with law enforcement. So, if you would think that if you're not really breaking the law, then you wouldn't need such resources.
This is the I'm so confused by this simply because it does just seem like a transparency law. I don't know how this, I guess in following this lightly and seeing what's been going on, it's been kinda confounding for me to figure out what the problem actually is with the law. So, okay, so this would be which organizations would have to disclose their funding?
I believe every single organization, which is not like a government organization, so that would
Okay.
include news organizations. That would include, you know, I, there's been people saying, "Oh, well, like NGOs that provide services to battered women would have to." Well, I don't think anyone really cares if the United States is providing, funding for women's shelters, for example.
Right,
But
right.
that's not what this is about. This is about the training of revolutionary groups.
Right. So this is why it's so confusing to me. If anything, it seems like this would be more democratic to find out where the money is coming from. I mean, that's the type of stuff that many of us are fighting for is we want transparency and funding. We want like when it comes to lawmakers, for example, we like to know exactly where are they getting their money. They're able to hide it through dark money sources, but we want that transparency. We like to know even with media sources where are you getting people ask me all the time, where who are you funded by?
Yeah,
Where's the funding coming from? Because they think that
yeah,
that funding sways the narrative, right? And I think there's good reason to believe that. We see that, of course, when it comes to mainstream media. We want to know who's funding CNN, who's funding Fox News. Oh, it's the big pharma organizations, or it's the military-industrial complex, right? That transparency is something that we ask for. We want more of. We demand it. That's democracy. How in the world are they interpreting a law that says you have to tell us where your money's coming from if it's coming from foreign sources? How is that anti-democratic?
yeah.
I I would understand it if they said we're not going to allow anything in our country that is, if they're going to put a ban on something, but they're just saying no. We just want to know where you're getting your money. We want to know
Right.
where your influence is coming from. So that to me is odd that because I do know that many of the protests that are happening in Georgia, you've said this in your work that the protests are there's a lot of legitimate, these are not just a bunch of paid actors trying to cause a revolution in Georgia, right? These are genuine people. But what would they genuinely be upset about? Are they just are they upset like they don't want to know this is where I don't understand it. They don't want
They're
to know where the money comes from?
they're not upset about the law itself. They're upset about the consequences that have been threatened. So they want to join the European Union, and the European Union has said if you pass this law, you can't.
What?
You
Why
can't.
in the world? Okay, so that's real democratic. So the
Right.
European Union is saying to them, if you pass this law that allows your population to know that we're there heavily funding a lot of the stuff that's going on, then you can't join. They're never going to join the Europe. For one, it's a sham. It's like saying to NATO all these years, right? I mean, to Ukraine all these years, you're going to join NATO. You're going to join NATO. And then they never are able to join NATO. And then the minute that Sweden says, we want to join NATO, they're like, all right, you're in. Just like that, right?
Yeah.
You're in. You and Finland are in. And then Ukraine, they've dragged this on for years and years. They were never going to really let Ukraine into NATO. It was just to piss off Russia, right? Georgia, why in the world would they ever be in the EU? I mean, look at where they are geographically.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, Turkey's not even in the EU. Turkey's been begging to be in the EU for years, and they're not letting Turkey, a NATO member, in. a powerful country and they're not letting them in, why in the world would they then go a little further east and say, all right, we'll let Georgia? I mean, is Bulgaria even in the, where do you're in Serbia. Where
I
do you
believe
live?
I'm in Serbia. Serbia is not part of the European Union.
So even
I
Serbia is
I
not
do
even in the
believe
EU. That's closer.
Bulgaria is, but it's not so much about geographics as much as look, what was it, a couple years ago, Colombia was made like an honorary NATO member or something. I forget what the exact phraseology was, but uh, they're certainly not in the North Atlantic. Um,
Right,
but
right, right. I
it's
mean,
really
if it's going
about
to be about, if it's,
alignment.
I mean, if it's cultural, then let Australia in the EU. I mean, let let
It
Canada in the EU at this
Right.
point.
It's not cultural, it's economic. So, I mean, you certainly want as few holdovers of Soviet social policy, um,
Yeah,
you know, before letting somebody in. You want to be able to, and I mean, why? Again, you hit the nail on the head. Why would you want to join the EU? I mean, look at what joining the EU has done for Greece, for example.
right.
Um,
Yeah,
so yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I think that there's still this kind of like American dream style aspiration at play here, and it's unfortunate because I don't think it will do them any good. And I haven't examined the polling closely, but Georgian Dream, the ruling party, which is against this law, um, I mean, which is pushing this law, uh, did get elected democratically. So I believe their next elections are in October. So we'll
mhm.
really get a verdict from the population at that point, based on where they place which parties they place their votes into.
I mean, this just seems to me, look, Georgia is never going to be able to join the EU. They might want to, they might dream about it. It might be something that the population thinks is really popular, but the EU is never going to let them in ever. And so all they're doing is stringing them along and making them believe, and they're only doing it the same way what they've done to Ukraine with NATO. It's just to piss off Russia. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what this sounds like. Do the Georgians look at, do you think, in your investigating on this, do they look at Ukraine and think they could be next if they continue down the path of siding with the West and antagonizing Russia? Do they even put that together?
Well, I mean, I think much like U.S. foreign policy planners, they don't really have the gift of foresight. Um, and you see among the opposition, the people that are against this law, a huge degree of support for Ukraine. One of the leaders of this movement, who basically gave the government an ultimatum that, like, if they don't drop the law, then he's going to bring the protesters to their doorstep, which he did. Um, he was an advisor to Petro Poroshenko, the notoriously corrupt former president of Ukraine, who
Mhm.
made his fortune off of privatizing the Karl Marx confectionery.
Yeah.
So uh, you have, and this is a guy who has made a career out of pushing for things like biometric passports, digital signatures, e-voting, that kind of thing. So I
Mhm.
mean, these are people that are like, Westerners at heart, you know, um, and really mixed in closely with the nastier parts of the American and European Union deep states.
Right.
At
But I mean,
simultaneous.
they can remain Western. I mean, look at, like I said, Australia, right? Not in the EU, far, far away even, and yet is still able to be a Western style nation, able to, they're not in NATO. At least they're not in NATO, right? They have AUKUS, the new thing, AUKUS that they're doing,
Hmm,
right? Um, so
I
you
don't
don't
believe they're a
have to.
member of NATO. They are Five
No,
Eyes.
you're right. They're an AUKUS, the new thing that they've put together with
Hmm.
Australia and the UK and the United States. But so Georgia, countries like Georgia and even Ukraine, the well, I mean, why did they do this to themselves? I just look at this and think, you don't, what good does being a NATO member? It doesn't even seem to matter. So why threaten Russia in this way, cause a war, destroy your nation when, I mean, look at the United States with Israel. We have We don't have NATO with Israel yet. We're their strongest ally that's giving them anything and everything that they ask for. You don't have to be in NATO in order for the United States to be your big bad bully, right?
Sure.
It's not a requisite. You don't need to be in NATO to have that kind of defense. Same thing with being a European style country. I mean, if the Georgians want to do that and they yearn for that, they can have that without antagonizing and joining the EU.
Yeah.
They just do it on their own. Be an independent nation. Do what you want as your own independent nation.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think that you have to understand that for the public in Georgia, their country has been used as a laboratory for uh, meddling, for foreign interference. So you have this again, this massive NGO sphere,
Yeah.
which has turned social sciences into that a science. So just as you can see that, all they have to do in the United States to um, make Trump very unpopular is say that he's a Russian asset. Well, they're doing that there. They're saying this is a Russian law. I mean, what does that actually mean? It doesn't matter. It
Right,
sounds bad.
right. Yeah, what does that mean? So when they say it's a Russian law, did the Russians come through and say, "Listen, you need to pass this law or else?" And then did the EU say, "Well, if you do pass this law because Russia said you had to do it, we're never going to let you into the EU?" I mean, why is it a Russian law?
I mean, I haven't seen any evidence of Russian involvement. Russia has a similar law, but again, so does the U.S. and the European Union itself is considering one. So
I mean, it's just so I'm just so dumbfounded by this simply. I guess, I mean, you've explained it so much better. So now I do understand a lot better, which is that they're protesting because they want to be in the EU. That seems to be what they're protesting. They're
yeah,
saying, we want to be a member of the EU. You're killing our chances with this law because the EU is saying we can't be if we have this law. Is that
well,
how?
yeah, and I think more broadly, while the United States and Europe don't really want this level of transparency, they also stand to gain from civil unrest in Georgia. And if there is a civil war or some kind of color revolution or coup. I'd like to talk about the president of the country in a moment, but what they could do is they could use Georgia to open up another front against Russia. So
Right,
Russia would have
right.
two countries that they're at war with on their border, which is clearly not something that would be very beneficial for them. Although the first one didn't seem to have gone as poorly as maybe some Western planners thought it would.
Thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson show, which you could catch just by heading to that link down below, KimIversonShow.com. You can watch the full show from what you just watched, or you could catch the full show live Monday through Friday, live streams, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. See you then. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Never miss an episode. Never miss a clip. Never miss a segment. Thanks, guys.